Hello, everybody. My name is Alayna Gonzalez, and this is my presentation on the design development and iteration of my capstone project, which is called Temple High. So to begin with my visual sketch and progress page, the sketch on the very top to the right is the very first sketches that I ever created for the characters in my comic. I just drew some quick sketches of what I thought each character would look like, along with some details describing their personality. Obviously, this first iteration isn't what they look like in the very end, I would say. The images at the bottom are kind of what each character looks like in the very final. But these initial sketches were just very helpful to kind of get my ideas flowing. The image to the left of this, the Temple High page 2 storyboard, I didn't create a storyboard for each of my pages just because the storyboard kind of does take a lot of time, I think. But I think that creating a storyboard for some of my pages was really helpful just because sometimes I was a little, iffy on how the layout would be of each of my pages. And I think that writing out what you want the dialogue to be for each of the pages from start to finish, as well as creating some general images of what you want to include on each page, kind of helps you think of how the layout will be, even if it doesn't always, emulate the storyboard 100% at the very end. I think it's still very helpful. And then the image to the left is what the very rough sketch of the first page will look like, or was going to look like. I don't think that it really ended up looking like this 100% in the end, just because I think that there was just a little bit too much going on and it was a little bit confusing. But just having general rough sketches in the beginning is very helpful because obviously it's okay if things change in the end. It just kind of helped get my ideas flowing and starting. Even if things don't 100% reflect this initial sketch in the end, it was fine. These were some mock-ups that I included in my large poster. So I obviously wanted to include some of my images on like everyday household items or just items in general that people would kind of purchase that were excited for the comic, because I'm kind of, trying to think of this as like a real thing that people would be excited for. And my general audience for Temple High would probably be like young girls, anywhere from like 15 to like in their mid to early 20s. So I think that these were just items that I thought girls, though in that age range, I kind of would see them just using. And then obviously the mock-up in the middle, this is a comic, so I kind of just wanted to show what it would be like reading the comic in like a real life mock-up, what it would kind of look like in a real book. And then these were some examples of the finished colored dialogue on each page, comic book finished examples. So yeah, I mean, these kind of explain themselves. These were just what the very final renditions of the comic kind of looked like. I'm really excited with how they turned out. I think that I really like the colors. I think they just stand out really well to me. And I also was really excited just with how the final dialogue looked as well. I kind of had to tinker with it a lot, but I think that the comic font that I chose really just makes it feel like a comic as well. Some refinements that I made based on the professor's feedback or on my own feedback as well. So from the professor, my initial comic book cover page, the font was just not very legible. So I changed that on the right. I ended up using a font instead of the one on the left. The left one was called Death Crow Demo, but I changed it to Melitha Collection just because I think that it was just more legible, but it also just kind of gave more of a witchcraft feel as well, which is kind of what the comic is actually about. The left one just kind of felt too edgy, which isn't really what the comic is supposed to feel like. And I think the right one, just because the way that it is more, it's more easy to see what the background is as well. While the one on the left was just kind of taking up the whole background and making the images in the back a lot harder to see. And then some refinements that I made based on my own feedback. So to the left of each of these pages on the bottom, you can see that there's no text in the bubbles, because I think that at first I had created dialogue in like Word documents that I was going to put into each of these comic book pages, but I just had too much dialogue that they just were not going to fit in all of these bubbles. And at the same time, why would you want to read a comic where there's just so much to read? And obviously, you want to focus more on the images as well. So I had to take my time and kind of condense the information to where it would fit into each of these bubbles, but also not be too much dialogue in each of these bubbles as well. And on the right of each of the images, you can see where I kind of condensed the image or condensed the words, and I also added sound effects instead so that it would take up less of the dialogue too in each of the bubbles, and I could also technically have more dialogue on each page as well, because it kind of invokes their emotions as well. And then, so my final reflection on the comic thus far. So I'm still obviously working on tweaking out some things. I'm working on the final iterations of each of the pages, just with general finalizing of the color. I'm also working on a branding guide. Obviously, I've created some of the pages so far. I think that I also just need to generally work on the large poster as well. Um, so yeah, I think just generally tweaking things. But I think from beginning to the end of this comic so far, I've made a lot of progress. Just researching in general too has really helped me with coming up with ideas for each of the pages. Um, and sketching as well. I would say definitely like just taking my time to sketch each one of the pages has been such a big help. If I didn't sketch each of the pages before, I don't think that the comic would be as finalized as it is right now. And yeah, I mean, I think that so far it's been a really great experience, and I think that my initial capstone idea is really coming through with this project as well. Um, I'm just excited to see like what it is when it's finished and create more mock-ups as well for my comic book so that it just feels more final as well. Thank you so much for listening.